A month after I died, my wife resurrected me. Part 1. Written by Theeaglestrikes. So grab your coffee, sit back, and enjoy the show. That's only the cherry on top of the terrifying situation in which I find myself. This story isn't about me. It's about my wife. It's about the price she had to pay to resurrect me. This year, on November 1st, I died. There was a car collision. I actually remember it. It is perhaps the most vivid memory of my entire life. There's almost nothing on this earth quite as terrifying as remembering your own death. Almost. When I woke on December 1st, I was in my bed. What do I remember from November? Nothing. I ceased to exist, and then I existed again. I don't remember an afterlife. That in itself was enough to break my mind. Maybe souls exist, or maybe they don't. I have no idea. I only know that it took a psychological toll to suddenly find my soul, or whatever you might call my essence, had returned to its body. In addition, my body had surprisingly not decomposed. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. That isn't the story I need to tell. Robert? My wife's sweet voice was the first thing I heard. I tentatively opened my eyes to see her kneeling beside our bed, clutching my hand in hers. Emily? I wheezily croaked. Good morning, my love, she sobbed, leaning in to kiss me repeatedly. How? I whispered. That was all I could muster. What else was there to say? I don't think Emily had expected me to remember my death. She seemed apprehended by my question, but she quickly composed herself. It wasn't your time, she feebly responded. I saved you. Emily, I said, I died. I remember dying. No, you... Emily fumbled for a lie. You were hanging by a thread and... You're lying, Emily, I interjected. I stopped existing. There was nothing. I know I died. I felt it. And something tells that a lot of time has passed, so how am I alive? Emily's lip quivered and she looked away from me. I stared at her, awaiting an answer. I'm not sure how long we spent in that state of silence. What is today's date? I asked. Emily finally looked up at me, face covered in tears. December 1st, she whispered. December 1st? I yelled incredulously. That doesn't, how can that be? A month? A whole month? What did you do, Emily? How am I back on Earth? How is my body in one piece? Emily wiped away her tears, leaning forwards and resting on my chest. I found a way to undo what happened, she finally replied. My wife wouldn't tell me more than that. She left me to, as she put it, wrap my head around things. I spent hours staring at the wall, contemplating what Emily might have done. But I'm not an imaginative man. I couldn't possibly have managed to conceive the horrors that had unfolded in order to return me to the land of the living. When I eventually made my way downstairs after showering and getting dressed, my wife was sitting on the sofa. She smiled and pointed at a pizza box on the coffee table. It was from my favorite takeaway. Robbie, Emily said, trying to stifle tears, I know you're scared. I'm scared. But I can't tell you how I brought you back, okay? I just need you to understand. After you died, I couldn't do it. I couldn't see a way forwards without you. So I found a way forwards. With you. I wanted to say something, but my heart melted at the sight of my beautiful wife, the pizza box on the table, and our favorite film ready to play on the TV. You see, I had come to terms with the concept of death, but I was intoxicated once more by the allure of life and love. Even though I hadn't existed for the past month, I had missed Emily. I had missed life. I decided that maybe I didn't need to know how. I had returned. That first night was perfect. I didn't even notice the small details that would later concern me. The next day, as I was eating breakfast, I came down from the high of the previous night. What about my parents? Your parents? Our friends? I asked. I can't hide in here forever. How will we explain this to them? I haven't figured that out yet, Emily sheepishly admitted. And that was when I first noticed it. I noticed the slight paleness of my wife's face. Are you unwell? I asked. You should eat something. I'm fine, Emily assured me. I haven't seen you eat anything since yesterday, I said. What's wrong with you? I'm fine, Robbie. Emily reiterated. "I'm used to not eating. Grief will do that to you." I wasn't entirely convinced, but it seemed like a reasonable explanation. I felt guilty. She'd spent a month carrying the burden of losing me. I had the luxury of simply ceasing to exist. That night, however, I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of a car starting. I looked out of the window and saw Emily drive away. She returned an hour later and silently crept back into bed. I pretended to be asleep. It seemed a better idea to discuss things when we'd woken up. "Where did you go?" I asked. Yet again, Emily was not eating breakfast and she looked even paler than the night before. "We needed milk," my wife replied. "At 2 a.m.? I scoffed. "From the petrol station," she explained. "It's a 24-hour shop." "The milk could have waited," I replied. Emily was lying. There was absolutely no doubt about that. What was she hiding? Suspecting that my wife might repeat her early morning trip, I had the idea to plant my iPad on her back seat and track it from my phone. I was correct. A little after midnight, when Emily started her car, I tiptoed downstairs, waited for her to pull away, and slipped onto the driveway. I started up my car and tracked her at a safe distance. She did not travel far. In fact, when she drove into the center of the city, I thought for a painful second that she might have been telling the truth. I felt like a terrible husband for doubting her, but she did not park at the petrol station. My app showed that she had parked near a nightclub. My wife hates nightclubs. She hates staying up past 9 p.m. Even if we were to ignore the fact that I died and came back to life, this still would have been a suspicious situation. That being said, my mind never, for a moment, leapt to the concept of an affair. I felt she had proven her love by, well, resurrecting me. I parked a few streets away from her and traveled on foot, tracking my iPad's location. I found her Ford Focus in a deserted car park, but I couldn't see her, so I hid in the bushes and waited in the dark. The lights and noise of the city had been comforting, but this empty car park, lit by a solitary lamppost, was eerily dark and silent. There was something unnatural about the car park. It was shrouded in a thick mist. Emily emerged from a back alley with a young, handsome man. I assumed she found him at the nightclub. I was nauseated. He leaned in to give my wife a kiss, but she shoved him back. I was on the precipice of leaping from the bush and revealing my location, but something petrifying happened. My wife changed. Her pupils vanished and her eyes turned black. With vice-like strength, Emily clutched either side of the man's horrified face and squeezed. I don't know how to describe what I saw, but I will try. It has plagued my dreams for the past week. The high-pitched scream that emanated from the man's mouth was the most haunting sound I have ever heard. His arms and legs flailed helplessly as his body began to shrivel away. His flesh sagged, clinging tighter and tighter to the ghastly outline of his skeleton with every passing moment. It was as if I had seen the young man age a lifetime in mere seconds. Emily released what was left of his face, and her eyes returned to normal, though her flesh was just as pale. The worst part is that her victim, for some reason I cannot grasp, had not yet perished. He lay on the cold tarmac of the car park, futilely gasping for air with his wheezy, deflated lungs. His fragile skin was barely able to stretch across his bones. I believe I even saw the outline of his heart beating beneath his shirt. That macabre image seems to be permanently etched onto my eyeballs. The man's face was a nightmarish apparition. It was no more than a skull coated in papery flesh. His eyes were glazed over. If they were the window to his soul, then his soul had most certainly been absorbed by my wife. His arms and legs were broken and twisted in ways that I can only imagine must have been agonizing. Eventually, the man's incessant writhing ceased. With unnatural ease, my wife carried his corpse to her vehicle, dumped the crumpled mess into the trunk, and drove away. I didn't go home. I've been living in my car. Whatever my wife did to resurrect me, it extracted a vile toll. I've conducted online research, but I can't find anything on the subject. I assume she feeds on the essence of others to sustain herself. I found myself overcome with guilt. My wife made a desperate decision, and it came with an unimaginable price. That's why I've been browsing the internet to find some sort of explanation for what happened to her. Perhaps I can stop her. Perhaps I can also save her. Earlier this morning, I found something. I was starting to give up on my online research, but a particular forum recommended a Gothic bookstore not too far from the city. They have a library section with various books detailing the history of the occult. Apparently, they have information you won't find on the internet. I drove straight there and waited for the store to open at 9 a.m. The little old lady seemed shocked to see a customer waiting at the door, bright and early. Her name was Greta. She was warm and helpful, unlike the sinister shopkeeper I'd pictured in my head. I didn't tell her about my wife, but I asked about a creature that could do the things my wife has been doing. Greta's eyes widened. I was sure the bookstore darkened. The lady asked me how I'd come to know of such an unearthly power. I didn't answer. I just repeated that I needed answers. Greta nodded and beckoned for me to follow her. From a shelf in a forgotten crevice of her store, she picked up a dusty, leather-bound book that was entitled Veil Breaking. "Do you know somebody who has broken the veil?" Greta asked, her eyes swimming with terrified tears. "It's just a story," I replied. "Thank you for helping me. How much will that cost?" Greta looked at me with sorrowful, pitying eyes. She pushed the book into my arms and patted it. Her gaze suddenly fell to the floor. "No charge. I fear you have already paid a heavy price," she whispered. I left the bookstore, returned to my freezing car, and started to flip through the pages of the nightmarish history book. I won't write an entire novel here, but I'll explain veil breaking to you. I'll explain what my wife did. The book claims, firstly, that every human has a soul. I didn't used to be spiritual. After I witnessed my wife's ghoulish transformation, however, I found myself unable to deny the existence of something greater than me. All souls exist on the other side of a thin veil, according to the book. I believe it. Veil breaking is the process of recovering said souls and returning them to the physical world. That comes with a price. Additionally, there is a process whereby the deceased individual's body must be restored to perfection. That also comes with a price. The being that extracts the price is called Date. Many different people have depicted him in many ways. There was one drawing of the entity. It had a bony, contorted, vaguely human figure, much like that of its victims, and it also had horrible black eyes, Emily's eyes. There were also bodies at its feet. Shriveled people were lying in a mangled mess and clinging to their last moments of life, much like the man I saw several nights ago. There was also this passage. It is believed that Date can break the veil and restore any lost soul. In return, the entity demands the body of the invoker as a vessel. The vessel must feed on the life essence of others. If it does not, it perishes. I stopped reading at that point. It was as I'd feared. My wife had forged a deal with some unholy thing, torturing herself just to bring me back. Foolishly, before I'd even read more of the book, I raced home. In the early morning light, our snow-covered house glistened. Everything was so still, so calm. I noticed Emily's car on the driveway. I gentled pulled alongside it. As I stepped out of the vehicle, my feet crunched in snow. It was the only sound on our silent road. When I reached the front door, I fumbled for my keys before noticing that it was unlocked and slightly ajar. I timidly pushed it open. "Emily," I called out. Our house was shrouded in darkness. I realized every curtain had been drawn. I expected to not see or hear a thing, but there was a creak on an upstairs floorboard. Summoning my last ounce of courage, I braved the stairs. Each step groaned beneath my feet as I ascended towards the lightless void of our upstairs landing. There was the sudden sound of a door slamming, our bedroom door. I breathed deeply, tiptoeing towards the bedroom. I coiled my trembling fingers around the door handle and paused. "Emily," I hoarsely projected. "I'm going to open the door, okay? I love you. I'm sorry for not coming home. I just had to wrap my head around some things." Nothing. Not a peep. I opened the door. Inside, I saw something so horrifying that I immediately closed the door again. The scene within our bedroom was a real-life interpretation of the drawing from my veil-breaking book. My wife, now possessing a fully white complexion, was standing on our bed, surrounding by a pile of 24 bony, depleted corpses. No, that's not quite right. Not all of them were corpses. Some of them were still writhing on the bed and the floor. One young woman looked at me with the same pupilless, glazed-over eyes as the first victim I'd seen in the car park. She raised one skeletal arm towards me. It was snapped backwards at the elbow and her hand hung limply at the wrist. Her flesh was so thin that it had torn around her hand. I saw all of that horror in the space of a second. When I slammed the door shut, Emily unleashed an inhuman wail. "Robert," I heard her wheeze. I held the door closed, too frightened to remove my hand from the handle. I heard the bed springs release, crunching footsteps across bones, then an ominous thud on the door. "You're home," she whispered. "Emily," I cried, "I love you so much, but I need to figure out how to stop this horror." I released the door handle, sprinted down the stairs, darted out of the front door, and retreated to my car. I've been sitting here for the past hour, staring at the open front door to my blackened house. I'm flicking through the veil-breaking book. I hope to find some answers. Hey family. A very big thank you to Theeaglestrikes for allowing me to narrate such an awesome tale. Be sure to check out their Reddit profile for more of their awesome works. If you would like to support us and make a donation, I'd be very much appreciative. I do have PayPal and a Buy Me a Coffee account. Be sure to also check out our merch store. There are plenty of items and designs to choose from. If you enjoyed this video, then why not check out the next one, here, on the right-hand side. You can also follow us. All my socials and all my other links are contained within the Linktree link below. Take care, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.